I arrived at my sister's luxury wedding ready to celebrate, only to find my seat missing and my profession mocked. Her mother-in-law smirked, calling me the help. So I took back my $10,000 check, leaving them with an unpaid venue and a silent room. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The pain in my left leg was a dull, throbbing constant, a rhythmic reminder of the car accident that had nearly taken my mobility 6 months ago. I shifted my weight, leaning heavily on the custom cane Parker had bought me, sleek, black, with a silver handle that matched my evening gown. I wasn't just here as a guest. I was the sister of the bride, the maid of honor in spirit if not in title due to my injury, and, quietly, the financial backbone of this entire affair. The venue, the Gilded Lily, was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto tables set with the finest linens I had personally sourced through my company, Table and Vine. The scent of white roses and expensive perfume filled the air. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the nerves that had been fraying for weeks. Beside me, Parker squeezed my hand, his thumb rubbing over my knuckles in that grounding way he had. "You look beautiful, Jen," he whispered, leaning in so his breath tickled my ear. "Just remember, we sit down, we eat, we smile, and then we go home and put your leg up." I smiled back, grateful for him. Deal. We made our way to the front of the reception hall where the seating chart was displayed on a massive, antique mirror written in gold calligraphy. I scanned the top table, the family table. Mother of the bride, father of the bride, groom's parents, grandparents. My eyes dropped to table 1, the VIP table for siblings and close bridal party. Adeline bride, Micah groom, best man, maid of honor, Micah's sister. I frowned. I scanned table 2, table 3. "Parker, do you see our names?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach that had nothing to do with my injury. Parker, who is usually the calmest man I know, narrowed his eyes. "No, I'm checking the distant cousin table near the back. Maybe there was a mistake." But there wasn't a mistake. We weren't on the mirror. Confused, thinking perhaps they had made a special place card for us at the head table without listing it, I limped toward the front of the room. The room was filling up. Guests were taking their seats, the clinking of glasses and laughter creating a wall of sound. I reached the head table just as Patricia, my sister's new mother-in-law, swept in. She was wearing a dress that was arguably too close to white, a pale, shimmering champagne that screamed for attention. She saw me standing there, leaning on my cane, looking at the empty spaces between the place settings. "Genesis," she said, her voice smooth and cold like polished marble. "What are you doing here?" "I'm looking for my seat, Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Parker and I aren't on the chart." She brought a manicured hand to her chest, feigning shock, but the corner of her mouth twitched upward. A smirk. A definite, undeniable smirk. "Oh, darling," she chuckled, loud enough for the groom's family at the nearby table to hear. "We didn't assign you a seat. We assumed you'd be too busy serving." The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. The ambient noise of the room faded into a buzz. "Excuse me," I asked, my grip tightening on my cane. "Well," she gestured vaguely at the staff moving around with trays. "You run a catering company, don't you? Table and Vine. Since you're in the industry, we just thought you'd want to be where you're most comfortable, with the help. Helping things run smoothly. Besides," she looked pointedly at my cane, "I suppose you could sit on a stool in the kitchen if your leg acts up." I looked around. I saw Micah, the groom, standing a few feet away, adjusting his tie. He heard her. He absolutely heard her. He looked down at his shoes. I looked at table 15 near the bathrooms. Even my second cousin, a man Adeline hadn't spoken to in 5 years, had a reserved seat with a gold-embossed name card. The humiliation was a physical blow. It hit me harder than the airbag had 6 months ago. I had spent weeks calling in favors, upgrading the wine list for free, and ensuring the floral arrangements were wholesale cost, saving them thousands. And in my purse, I was carrying a check for $10,000, a gift Adeline had tearfully hinted they needed for a down payment on a house. Parker stepped up beside me, his face thunderous. "Patricia, that is enough. Genesis is the bride's sister." "And she is a service worker," Patricia sniffed, dismissing him. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap like a bone breaking. It was a quiet, decisive click, like a lock turning. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I reached into my clutch, pulled out the cream-colored envelope containing the $10,000 check, and held it up. "I see," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the sudden lull in conversation near the head table. I didn't realize a $10,000 wedding gift and free event planning only buys me a shift in the kitchen. Patricia's eyes widened, locking onto the envelope. "I'll just take this back then," I said, tucking the envelope back into my bag. "Good thing refunds exist." I turned on my heel awkwardly because of the leg and began to walk away. Parker was instantly at my side, offering his arm for support. "Wait," Patricia hissed, stepping forward, realizing the optics of the situation as heads turned. "Genesis." That was Adeline's voice. I didn't stop. I walked through the double doors, the silence of the room following me out like a shockwave. I pushed into the cool night air of the parking lot, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was halfway to the car when I heard the doors bang open behind me. "Genesis, please stop." I turned. Adeline was running across the asphalt in her massive, lace ball gown, the expensive fabric dragging on the dirty ground. She looked frantic, her mascara already threatening to run. The betrayal I felt looking at her wasn't just about a seat, it was about the silence. The silence of the groom, the silence of my sister while her mother-in-law planned this. "Genesis, please," she panted, catching up to us, grabbing my arm. I pulled away gently but firmly. "Don't, Adeline." "She didn't mean it," Adeline sobbed, glancing back at the venue where guests were now peering out the windows. She has old-fashioned views about labor." "Labor?" I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "I own the company, Adeline. I don't serve the hors d'oeuvres. And even if I did, is that how you treat family? By expecting them to work at your wedding while you seat cousin Greg in the front row?" It's complicated with her," Adeline pleaded, wringing her hands. "No," I said, opening the car door Parker held for me. "It's actually very simple. You made a choice. You chose her approval over my dignity." I slid into the seat, the leather cool against my feverish skin. As Parker started the engine, I looked at my sister one last time. She looked small, lost in a dress she couldn't afford without my help. But they had forgotten one crucial thing, I whispered to myself as we drove away, leaving her standing in the dark. The drive home was a blur of passing streetlights and Parker's knuckles white on the steering wheel. He was fuming, muttering under his breath about entitled witches and spineless cowards, but I couldn't speak. I was too busy processing the physical toll the night had taken. My leg was throbbing violently now. The adrenaline that had allowed me to make my dramatic exit was fading, replaced by the sharp, biting pain of nerve damage. I reclined the seat, closing my eyes, but all I could see was Patricia's smirk. "We assumed you'd be too busy serving." It wasn't just the insult, it was the precision of it. Patricia knew exactly where to strike. 2 days later, I was sitting in my home office, my leg elevated on a plush ottoman, an ice pack strapped to my ankle. My phone had been buzzing incessantly for 48 hours. Adeline had called 20 times. Micah had texted once, "Can we talk? Mom is really upset." I hadn't replied to any of them. Instead, I was looking at the spreadsheets on my dual monitors. Table and Vine wasn't just a catering company, we were a full-service event production firm. I had built this business from the ground up, starting in a tiny rental kitchen and growing it into the premier agency in the state. I worked with CEOs, celebrities, and politicians. I was respected. But to Patricia, who had married into a legacy banking family and never worked a day in her life, I was the help. I remembered the first time I met her, 3 months ago at the engagement dinner. I had just come from a site inspection, wearing my company polo and tailored work trousers, dusty from checking a venue. "Oh," she had said, looking me up and down, "You're the sister. I thought you were the waitress taking our drink order." I had laughed it off then, thinking it was a clumsy faux pas. Adeline had kicked me under the table, pleading with her eyes for me to be nice. So I was nice. I swallowed my pride. I offered to help with the wedding. I used my vendor discounts. I called in favors with the city's best florist, who usually had a 6-month waiting list. I looked at the contract on my screen now. The contract for the floral arrangements. The contract for the specialty lighting. The contract for the vintage wine selection. Because Adeline and Micah were tight on cash, due to Patricia insisting on the most expensive venue in the city, I had put these contracts in my name. I had signed the guarantees. I had paid the deposits with my corporate card, with the understanding that they, or Patricia, would reimburse me for the final balance, or I would count it as part of my gift. I picked up my phone and opened the group chat with my head of operations. "Genesis, pull the files for the Miller-Stone wedding. Specifically, the vendor agreements for this coming weekend's post-wedding brunch and the final reconciliations for the reception." The reception was over, but the financial fallout wasn't. The vendors were my friends, my colleagues. They had done this job at cost because I asked them to. I thought about Adeline standing in the parking lot, defending a woman who treated me like dirt. "She has old-fashioned views," Adeline had said. I took a sip of herbal tea, the steam curling around my face. The pain in my leg flared again, a reminder of the vulnerability Patricia had mocked. She saw my cane and saw weakness. She saw my profession and saw servitude. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. In the world of high-end events, the person who holds the contracts holds the power. And Patricia hadn't paid a dime directly to the florist, the lighting crew, or the linen rental agency. I did. And technically, the wedding wasn't over until the final invoices were settled. The reception had happened, yes. But the venue hold for the Sunday brunch, the exclusive, high-society send-off Patricia had bragged about for weeks, was under my liability insurance. My phone buzzed again, a text from Adeline. "Adeline, please answer. Mom Patricia is threatening to cut us off if you don't apologize for causing a scene. She says you ruined her reputation." I stared at the screen. I ruined her reputation. I typed a reply, then deleted it. No more texts. No more playing the supportive big sister who absorbs the blows. "Parker," I called out. He appeared in the doorway, holding a fresh ice pack. "Yeah." "Call our lawyer," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "And then call the venue manager for the Sunday brunch. We need to discuss a cancellation." To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand Adeline. Our parents died when I was 22 and she was 19. I was fresh out of culinary school, ready to take on the world, and suddenly I was the head of the household. I shelved my dreams of traveling to France and started table and vine out of our parents' garage so I could be home every night. I paid for Adeline's final year of college. I paid for her first apartment. I paid for her therapy when the grief was too much. I shielded her. I became the rock so she could be the flower. And for a long time, we were a team. But then she met Micah. Micah wasn't a bad guy initially. He was a soft-spoken junior associate at a law firm, gentle and seemingly kind. But he was terrified of his mother, Patricia Stone. Patricia was a woman who wore her husband's money like armor. She didn't just have wealth, she had an obsession with hierarchy. In her world, there were the people who were served and the people who did the serving. There was no middle ground. When Adeline and Micah got engaged, Patricia took over immediately. "We can't have the wedding at A Park," she had sneered at Adeline's dream of a garden ceremony. "We need the Gilded Lily. The Stones have always married at the Lily." Adeline had crumbled. She always crumbled. And I had stepped in to make it happen, using my connections to get them a date at the exclusive venue, which was usually booked 2 years out. "I don't know how you know these people," Patricia had said during a planning meeting, looking at me with suspicion. "I suppose the service staff all talk to each other. I own the company that supplies the Lily with their linens and staff, Patricia," I had corrected her. "Right," she had waved a hand dismissively. "Linens? How quaint." The antagonist wasn't just a mean woman, she was a predator who smelled insecurity. She knew Adeline was desperate to belong to this elite family, and she used that desperation as a leash. She made Adeline dye her hair a lighter shade of blonde. She criticized Adeline's weight until my sister was living on salads. And now she had targeted me. By excluding me from the seating chart, she wasn't just being rude. She was establishing dominance. She was telling the entire room, all 200 of their high society guests, that the bride's family was beneath them. That we were staff. I looked at the Sunday brunch file on my desk. This brunch was Patricia's crown jewel. It was to be held at a private estate I managed, a sprawling historic property that didn't open to the public. Patricia had invited the mayor, several judges, and the partners at Micah's law firm. It was her moment to shine, to cement her status as the supreme hostess. But she had made a fatal error. Because the estate belonged to a client of mine who lived in Europe, the usage agreement was strictly between the owner and Table and Vine. Patricia wasn't on the contract. Micah wasn't on the contract. The contract stated, access granted solely to Genesis Vance and guests accompanied by her. If I wasn't there, the gates didn't open. And Patricia had just made it very clear that I was not a guest. My office door opened, and Parker walked in, looking grim. I just got off the phone with Adeline, he said, and she's hysterical. Apparently, Patricia is telling everyone that you stole the wedding gift money and that you were drunk at the reception. She's spinning the narrative. She's saying you caused a scene because you were jealous of Adeline. I felt the blood drain from my face, replaced by a cold, hard anger. Jealous, I whispered. I paid for the wine she was drinking while she said that. She's trying to get ahead of the story, Parker said, sitting on the edge of my desk. She knows she humiliated you, so now she has to paint you as the crazy sister so no one questions why you left. I looked at the cane leaning against my desk. I looked at the checkbook where I had written check after check to give Adeline the wedding of her dreams. Patricia wanted a war. She wanted to treat me like a servant. Fine. Parker, I said, reaching for my phone, get the car. Where are we going? We're going to the office, I said, my eyes narrowing. I need to print some invoices, and then I'm going to make a phone call to the estate security team. The investigation phase was over. It was time for the execution. The morning after the wedding debacle, my office felt less like a workspace and more like a war room. The silence was heavy, broken only by the whirring of the printer and Parker's rhythmic pacing. Okay, Parker said, stopping in front of my desk. So let me get this straight. You are the sole guarantor for the brunch venue tomorrow. Correct, I said, my voice eerily calm as I highlighted a clause in the contract. The estate on the bluff is a private residence owned by the Vanderbilts. They are clients of Table and Vine. They allow me to use the property for select events because they trust my team to protect their art collection and antique furniture. And Patricia thinks she rented it, I said, a dry laugh escaping my lips. She thinks her consultant booked it, but her consultant is just an overwhelmed assistant I've been helping for months because she had no idea how to handle a venue like this. The contract is in my name. The insurance is in my name. The security deposit, all $25,000 of it, is on my company card. I looked at the clock. It was 10:00 a.m. on Saturday. The brunch was scheduled for 11:00 a.m. Sunday. So, Parker said slowly, a smile spreading across his face, if you aren't there. The gates don't open, I finished. Security has strict instructions, no Genesis, no entry. But simply canceling the event wasn't enough. Patricia had publicly humiliated me. She had called me a servant in front of my own family and her high society friends. She had mocked my disability. She was currently spreading lies that I was a jealous, drunken mess. I needed leverage. I needed something that would expose her character, not just inconvenience her. Parker, I said, pass me the vendor file for the reception. He handed me a thick folder. I began to sift through the invoices. The florist, the band, the lighting crew, all people I had worked with for years. Then I saw it. A small, handwritten note from the venue coordinator at the Gilded Lily. Genesis, per your request, we upgraded the bar package to premium. The client, Patricia Stone, declined the upgrade initially but then demanded it last week, claiming she had sponsors. We put it on your account as a courtesy since you have a line of credit with us. My blood ran cold. Patricia had upgraded the bar package, a $15,000 difference, and claimed she had sponsors. She had told the venue to bill me without my consent. I picked up the phone and dialed the venue manager, Sarah. Genesis. Sarah answered on the first ring. I heard about last night. Are you okay? The staff were horrified. One of the servers said Patricia actually snapped her fingers at you. I'm fine, Sarah, I lied. Listen, I'm looking at the final invoice. Who authorized the bar upgrade? Patricia did, Sarah said. She came in on Thursday. She said she spoke to you and you agreed to cover it as an additional gift. I see, I said, my voice dropping an octave. And did she sign for it? Yes, Sarah said. I have her signature right here on the addendum. Email me a copy, I said, now. 5 minutes later, the PDF arrived in my inbox. I stared at the signature. It was a scrawl, barely legible, Patricia Stonevance. She had hyphenated her name with mine, as if we were partners, as if she had any right to sign on my behalf. This was fraud. Parker, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Look at this. He leaned over my shoulder. She forged, sort of. She misrepresented herself as an authorized signer on your account. She committed theft of services, I corrected him. She ordered $15,000 of premium liquor on my tab without my permission. But there was more. I logged into my company's bank portal. I checked the transaction history for the wedding deposits. 6 months ago, Adeline had transferred $5,000 to me for the initial venue deposit. 2 months ago, Micah had transferred $3,000 for the band. But there was a transfer from Patricia, $10,000 for catering services. I frowned. Table and Vine hadn't catered the wedding. The venue had in-house catering. We had just provided the linens and decor. I clicked on the transaction details. The memo line read, payment for Genesis Vance, service staff, and coordination. She had paid me. She had literally paid me to be a servant at my own sister's wedding. And she had done it months ago, categorizing it as a business expense so she could likely write it off. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The missing seat wasn't a last-minute snub. It was a premeditated act. She had planned this from the beginning. To her, I wasn't family. I was a vendor she could bully. She thinks she bought me, I whispered. What? Parker asked. She thinks she hired me to work the wedding, I said, pointing at the screen. That's why there was no seat. In her mind, the $10,000 transfer wasn't a contribution to the wedding budget. It was a way. Parker's jaw dropped. That is, twisted. It's about to get worse for her, I said, picking up my cane. Get the car, Parker. We're going to pay a visit to the happy couple before they leave for their honeymoon. We arrived at the hotel suite where Adeline and Micah were staying. It was 2:00 p.m. They were supposed to leave for the airport in 4 hours. I didn't knock. I texted Micah, I'm in the lobby. We need to talk, now, or I call the police. 3 minutes later, Micah appeared, looking pale and hungover. Adeline was behind him, her eyes puffy from crying. Genesis, Adeline started, reaching for me. Please, don't make a scene. Patricia is upstairs in her suite. Good, I said, leaning heavily on my cane. Call her down. What? Micah asked, blinking. Why? Because, I said, pulling the invoice from my bag, your mother committed fraud last night. And unless she wants to explain that to a judge, she needs to come down here and explain it to me. Micah looked at the paper, then at me. Fraud, what are you talking about? Just call her, Parker said, his voice hard. Now. 10 minutes later, Patricia swept into the lobby, looking fresh and impeccably dressed in a linen suit. She saw me and sighed, a dramatic, suffering sound. Really, Genesis, she said, not bothering to lower her voice. Haven't you done enough damage? Adeline has been crying all morning because of your little tantrum. My tantrum? I asked, stepping forward. Patricia, did you or did you not sign an addendum for a $15,000 bar upgrade on my company account? Patricia waved a hand. Oh, that. It was a misunderstanding. I thought you wanted to contribute more since you weren't paying for a plate. Excuse me, I said, my voice rising. I gave you a $10,000 check. I covered the linens, I covered the lighting. And you took the check back, she snapped, which was incredibly tacky, by the way. I took it back because you treated me like staff, I said. And speaking of staff, I saw the transfer. Service staff and coordination. You paid me to work my sister's wedding. Patricia smirked. Well, someone had to make sure things ran smoothly. Adeline certainly couldn't, and since that's what you do. I am the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, Patricia. I shouted, causing a bellhop to look over. I am not your maid. Lower your voice, Micah hissed, looking around nervously. No, I said, turning to him. You don't get to tell me what to do. You sat there and watched her humiliate me. You watched her treat your wife's sister like hired help. She just wants the best for us, Adeline whispered, looking at her shoes. The best. I laughed bitterly. Adeline, she stole from me. She committed fraud, and do you know what else? The brunch tomorrow. The one she's been bragging about to all her friends. Patricia stiffened. What about it? It's canceled, I said. Patricia's face went white. You can't cancel it, it's booked. It's booked under my name, I said, under my contract. And since I am apparently just the help, I don't have the authority to host a high society event for the Stone family, do I? You wouldn't dare, Patricia hissed, stepping closer. The mayor is coming. My friends are coming. Then you better start calling them, I said. Because the security team at the estate has been instructed to turn away any cars that aren't on my approved list. And guess whose name isn't on the list? Patricia stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. You petty little. She began. Careful, Parker warned, stepping in front of me. Fix this, Patricia demanded, turning to Adeline. Tell your sister to fix this. Adeline looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Jen, please, it's Micah's family. It's important. It's important to her, I said, pointing at Patricia. Adeline, look at what she's doing. She's using you. She's using me. She doesn't respect us. We are family, Adeline cried. No, I said, my voice breaking. We were family until you let her treat me like a servant. I turned to Patricia. You have until 5:00 p.m. to wire me the $15,000 for the bar tab. If the money isn't in my account, I'm filing a police report for credit card fraud and identity theft. I have your signature, Patricia. I have the witness testimony from the venue manager. Patricia laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. You're bluffing. You wouldn't ruin your sister's wedding weekend over money. Watch me, I said. I turned and walked out of the lobby, Parker right beside me. My heart was pounding, but my head was clear. I had fired the first shot, but the war wasn't over. By 4:30 p.m., the money hadn't arrived. Instead, my phone blew up. Not with texts from Adeline, but with calls from mutual acquaintances. Genesis, is it true you canceled the brunch because you were drunk? Genesis, Patricia says you're trying to extort them for more money. Genesis, I heard you're jealous of Adeline's marriage and trying to sabotage it. She was spinning the narrative again. She was painting me as the villain, the unstable, greedy sister who couldn't handle not being the center of attention. I sat in my office, staring at the phone. She's good, Parker admitted, reading a Facebook post Patricia had just made. It was a picture of her and Adeline smiling. Caption, so sad that jealousy can tear families apart. We will miss everyone at the brunch tomorrow, which has been canceled due to unforeseen circumstances with the vendor. The vendor, I whispered. She's still calling me the vendor. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. Parker, I said, call the security team at the estate. Tell them that under no circumstances is anyone to be let in tomorrow, not even if they claim to be family. Done, Parker said. But Jen, she's not going to stop. She's going to ruin your reputation in this town. People are already commenting on her post, saying they'll never use Table and Vine again. I looked at the comments. Wow, so unprofessional. I heard the owner has a drinking problem. never hiring them. This was it. She was coming for my livelihood. Okay, I said, standing up. She wants to play dirty, let's play dirty. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Stone family file I had compiled during the wedding planning. I had needed background checks for the security clearance at the estate. I scrolled through the documents. Patricia Stone, philanthropist, socialite, but there was something else. A small red flag I had noted months ago but ignored because she was family. A lien on the Stone family estate. I dug deeper. I accessed the public records database. The Stone family fortune wasn't what it seemed. They were leveraged to the hilt. The house was in foreclosure, the cars were leased, and the wedding. I pulled up the credit report I had run on Micah when he applied to be a co-signer on the venue, which was rejected, so I had to sign. Micah was drowning in student debt. Patricia wasn't just mean, she was broke. She needed this wedding to maintain the illusion of wealth. She needed the brunch to network with potential investors for a business venture she had been vague about. And she had used my money, my $10,000 gift, my vendor discounts, my company credit, to fund her charade. Parker, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. She didn't just steal the bar tab money because she's entitled. She stole it because she doesn't have it. What do you mean? She's broke, Parker. The old money is gone. It's all smoke and mirrors. I looked at the clock. 4:55 p.m. She's not going to wire the money, I said. She can't. At 5:00 p.m., my phone rang. It was Adeline. Please, she sobbed. Please don't call the police. She doesn't have the liquidity right now. It's tied up in investments. Investments, I asked, or debt, Adeline? There was a silence on the other end. You knew, I whispered. You knew they were broke. Micah told me last week, Adeline cried. They needed the wedding to look successful so his dad could close a deal. That's why the brunch is so important. The investors will be there. So you let her humiliate me, I said, my voice trembling. You let her treat me like a servant, you let her steal from me. All to protect a lie. I didn't have a choice. Adeline wailed. I'm married to him. You always have a choice, I said. I hung up. I looked at Parker. Get the printer ready. We're going to the brunch. I thought you canceled it, Parker said, confused. I did, I said. But the guests don't know that. They'll all show up at the gate. And Patricia will be there, trying to spin a story about how the vendor failed them. And you. I'm going to be there to welcome them, I said, with the truth. I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to expose the rot at the heart of the Stone family dynasty. I was going to show every single one of those high society guests exactly who Patricia Stone really was. Oh, I added, grabbing a folder. And Parker, bring the invoice. Sunday morning dawned bright and bitterly cold, a perfect reflection of my mood. Parker drove the sleek black sedan up the winding road to the estate on the bluff, the tires crunching on the gravel. I wore my sharpest blazer, a deep emerald green, and my posture was ramrod straight despite the lingering ache in my leg. We arrived at 10:30 a.m., 30 minutes before the guests were due. The heavy iron gates were closed, manned by two stern-looking security guards I had hired personally. But parked right in front of them, blocking the entrance, was a silver Mercedes. Patricia. She was pacing furiously, her phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly at the guards who were stone-faced. Micah stood by the car, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Adeline was inside the vehicle, her face buried in her hands. As we pulled up, Patricia spun around. Her eyes narrowed into slits when she saw me emerge from the car, leaning on my cane. You, she screeched, marching toward me. You spiteful, jealous little. Good morning, Patricia, I interrupted, my voice calm and carrying in the crisp air. I see you're having trouble with access. Open the gate, she demanded, pointing a manicured finger at the guards. My guests will be here any minute. The mayor is coming. Actually, I said, checking my watch, the contract for this venue is in my name. And since you failed to settle the outstanding balance for the unauthorized charges at the reception, specifically the fraud you committed, I have exercised my right to cancel the event. Fraud, she laughed, a shrill, desperate sound. It was a misunderstanding. I told you I would pay you back. With what money, Patricia? I asked softly. She froze. Excuse me. The money you don't have, I pressed. The liquidity that's tied up in investments, or perhaps the loans you're drowning in. Her face went from red to a ghostly white. How dare you? I ran a credit check, Patricia, I said, holding up the folder. It's public record, the liens, the foreclosure notices, the maxed-out credit cards. Micah looked at his mother, horror dawning on his face. Mom, what is she talking about? She's lying. Patricia screamed, lunging for the folder. Parker stepped in front of me, blocking her path. Just then, a sleek black town car pulled up behind Patricia's Mercedes. Then another, and another. The guests were arriving. The first car window rolled down. It was Mrs. Vandermeer, the wife of the city's biggest real estate developer, and a woman Patricia had been trying to impress for years. Patricia. Mrs. Vandermeer called out, looking confused. Is everything all right? Why are the gates closed? Patricia plastered a fake smile on her face, turning to the car. Oh, Helen, just a small mix-up with the catering staff. We'll have it sorted in a moment. She turned back to me, her eyes pleading now. Genesis, please, don't do this, not in front of them. You did it to me, I whispered. In front of everyone, you called me the help. You stole from me. I'll pay you, she hissed, I swear. You can't pay me, I said, but you can tell the truth. What? Tell them, I said, gesturing to the line of cars piling up behind Mrs. Vandermeer. Tell them why the gates are closed. Tell them you stole $15,000 from your daughter-in-law's sister. Tell them you're broke. Patricia stared at me, her chest heaving. She looked at the cars, then back at me. Her pride was a physical thing, a wall she couldn't climb over. I will ruin you, she whispered. You already tried, I said. I turned to Mrs. Vandermeer, who was now stepping out of her car, followed by several other confused guests. I apologize for the inconvenience, everyone, I announced, my voice steady. But this event has been canceled due to non-payment and fraudulent activity by the host. A collective gasp went through the small crowd. What, Mrs. Vandermeer asked, clutching her pearls. Patricia. She's lying, Patricia shrieked, her composure shattering. She's just a bitter, jealous waitress. She's trying to sabotage my son's wedding. Actually, I said, holding up the invoice with her forged signature, I am the owner of Table and Vine. And this is an invoice for $15,000 of unauthorized charges made to my corporate account by Patricia Stone, who forged my signature. I handed the paper to Mrs. Vandermeer. She looked at it, her eyes widening. And, I continued, I have also learned that the generous host has been using my vendor contracts to fund a lifestyle she can no longer afford. There is no brunch because the check for the deposit, which I wrote, was returned. It was a lie about the returned check, but it drove the point home. The silence was deafening. Patricia looked around, seeing the judgment in their eyes. The carefully constructed facade of the wealthy matriarch was crumbling. Micah, she cried, turning to her son, do something. Micah looked at his mother. Then he looked at Adeline, who was standing by the car, weeping silently. Then he looked at me. Is it true? He asked his mother. About the money. It's complicated, Patricia wailed. It's not complicated, Micah said, his voice shaking. It's true, isn't it? You used Adeline, you used Genesis. He turned to the crowd. I'm sorry, he said. My mother, he couldn't finish. He just shook his head and walked over to Adeline, taking her hand. We're leaving, Micah said. You can't leave. Patricia screamed. This is my event. There is no event, Mother, Micah said quietly. It's over. He led Adeline to my car, not his mother's. Can you take us home? He asked me. I looked at my sister. She looked broken, but for the first time in months, she was looking at me, not the ground. Get in, I said. As we drove away, I watched in the rearview mirror as Patricia stood alone in front of the locked gates, Mrs. Vandermeer and the other guests getting back into their cars and turning around, leaving her in a cloud of dust. The fallout was swift and brutal. Patricia didn't just lose face, she lost her social standing. Word spread through the high society circles faster than champagne at a gala. The fraud accusation, combined with the public scene at the estate, made her a pariah. The investors she had hoped to woo at the brunch disappeared. Without their backing, the house of cards collapsed. Within 3 months, the Stone family estate was foreclosed upon. Patricia moved into a small condo on the outskirts of town, bitter and alone, still blaming me for her downfall. Micah and Adeline's marriage survived, but just barely. They moved into a modest apartment, one they paid for themselves. Micah stood up to his mother for the first time in his life, cutting off financial ties and setting strict boundaries. He got a second job to pay off his debts, and slowly, painfully, he began to earn my respect. As for me, I didn't lose a single client. In fact, table and vine grew. The story of how I had protected my business and stood up to a fraudster became a sort of urban legend in the industry. Clients respected my integrity and my backbone. I sat in my office 6 months later, the cane leaning against the wall. I barely needed it anymore. Adeline was sitting across from me, looking healthier, happier. Her hair was back to its natural brown. "I'm sorry," she said, tracing the pattern on my desk with her finger. "I should have said something sooner. I was just so afraid of her." "I know," I said gently, "but you're not anymore." "No," she smiled, "I'm not." She reached into her purse and pulled out a check. It was for $15,000. "Micah and I saved up," she said, "to pay you back for the bar tab and the deposit." I looked at the check. It represented months of hard work, overtime, and sacrifice for them. I pushed it back across the desk. "Keep it," I said. "Consider it a late wedding gift for the house down payment." Adeline's eyes filled with tears. "Jen, I can't." "You can," I said, "but on one condition." "Anything." "Next time," I smiled, "I get to pick the seat." She laughed, a genuine free sound. "Deal." I watched her leave, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The money didn't matter. The vindication did. I had reclaimed my dignity, saved my sister, and proven that no amount of old money could buy class or silence the truth. Patricia had tried to put me in my place, but she had forgotten one crucial thing. I didn't just set the table, I owned it.